Our panel today is going to be an opportunity to meet the startups within construction focused on artificial intelligence. And of course, we're going to have a perspective of a venture capitalist as well. So I'll start off. My name is Samad Chaudhry. I work with Ellis Don. My focus is on digital project delivery, so construction technology, working with a lot of the startups and some of the venture focus, kind of what we are looking at. I'm joined with Aaron right here in the middle. Aaron's the managing partner at GS Futures. So essentially, they're a single LP venture capital fund with a focus, of course, on the built environment. Aaron's background kind of comes from construction, the industry there, working on P3s and the financial side, project analytics, and so on and so forth. And Aaron is one of those folks that once you get into the industry, he knows everyone. So I would definitely encourage anybody here that doesn't know Aaron to catch him afterwards. Apart from that, I mean, he's just an average person like the rest of us. He's got 2 kids. Family is kind of front and center, and you'll definitely pick that up from him as well. And then at the end there, we have Anthony. Some of you may know Anthony. He's got a little bit of a reputation. He kind of is the co-founder of Hypar. And his focus is really accelerating the building of projects with modern technologies and cloud solutions and computational developments, of course, like AI. And then, of course, right next to me, we have Alex. He's the head of marketing at Alice Technologies. His focus is on pushing the generative scheduling and the use of, again, modern technologies like AI to help optimize kind of project sequences and all that kind of capital planning. As many of you know, if we don't plan, we are all setting ourselves up for failure. So what Alice is doing and they're focused on is to get that optimization from technology and planning. And then, of course, we have Patrick right here as well. Patrick's background from Coastal Construction, which is a pretty big name down in the US, especially in the Florida region. The really cool story about what he's focused on now with Toggle.ai is a company that they spun out of Coastal. So it's focused on estimating and kind of making that, up to our 21st century standards using technology. So AI applied to taking off estimates, quantification, stuff like that. The other thing I got to mention is he was also a congressman in the US. So not many people we get up here have a political background, and he was successful. And at the time, I think you were the youngest congressman in U.S. history from like 2011 to 2016 or something like that. So again, we've got a great group of panelists here that we hope you guys can really start to get some value out of. So with that out of the way, we're going to jump right in. So first thing we're going to get the gentleman to kind of give us an overview of is kind of what is the state of AI adoption, and specifically within construction. But given that this is happening in Canada, we want your opinion too. What are the differences in the US market versus the Canadian market? So I'm going to start off by asking Aaron to kick it off.
Sure. Thank you, Ahmad. The man, the myth, the legend, above average. Listen, I appreciate, I'm just going to hit right to the punch on the cross-border observations, right? So I think there's kind of 3 big takeaways. One, I find the Canadian market, particularly the Toronto market, which is the part of the Canadian market I have spent personally the most time in, is much more willing to adopt and experiment quicker than large chunks of the US market. Particularly in the trades, specialty trades, there are some very strong ME trades here in the city, as well as mid-sized firms. So I think that that's something that's unique versus in the US market, the most progressive adoption, I think, tends to be at larger firms. Patrick, I'm excited to hear from Coastal, which is, a large firm, but closer to mid-market, which is very unique. It's not as common in the States. So I think that's one observation of the difference is an ability for AI to be impactful, not just at the biggest companies, but a broader base of companies. I think a second observation is even walking around here is the US market is often has a lot more startups that are vying for individual customers. And here, I think we see a little more concentration. But in both, if you're using AI, people have experimented a lot more on ChatGPT than any other solution anyone can name. And that's fair as a first entrance to where is an LLM useful. I'll probably save it at 2 and, and let the other panelists jump in here.
And then Anthony, why don't you jump in?
Yeah, I would say in working, especially with both firms in the U.S. and around the world who are interested in AI and trying it out, like yes, they're interested and they're willing to invest. But what we see is a lot of that stuff gets trapped inside their R&D group. And if the R&D group is not maintaining a very good pipeline down into production, it can be very difficult to cross that Rubicon into production. And there's a whole the best firms, we work with one firm out of Germany that they actually have an established pipeline out of research right into production. And when I ask them like, well, how do you deploy software? Like I got an answer that made sense. Oh, we have these people in these cities and this is what they do and they prepare documentation. And and I said, I have nothing to help you with on that. That sounds great. But it's an unusual thing that everybody has established the pipeline from innovation to incorporation into operations. And I would encourage large firms and small to think about that as we have to incorporate these technologies.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And then Patrick, just because your background, you've got the technology company that's focused on AI, and then you've got the construction company that's focused on the core market of construction. What are the differences you're seeing within the Canadian and US market, specifically from the appetite for AI, but then also the rollout?
Yeah, a great question, and you all would have a much more specific focus and comparison probably to Canada versus US. And if I could zoom out just for a second and look globally, for random reasons, our software, Toggle, is in like 12 countries right now. And in each of those countries, there's sort of early adopters and those that are very progressive and have a sort of a culture of tech adoption and forward thinking. And there's some that aren't. And I don't know if we have enough data points, quite frankly, to tell you that one country's better than another or more progressive. Because I've seen winners and losers or more progressive and not, I guess, and all of that. And even within some of the companies that we work with, Clark is our biggest customer, biggest GC. I forgot how many offices we're in, but there are 75% of their offices within the same company that are solely using our software, right? And they're great, they love it. And there's some that are just laggards, and I think they were acquired and just different culture. And so it's not only within a country or region, it's within each company. I see a difference personally in that adoption.
That's fair. That's a good answer. We're going to switch gears now and kind of jump into Alex, but essentially, can you elaborate how AI-powered simulations can optimize and reshape the industry? I mean, we heard a lot today about the technologies here. We got to force it to happen. And for those of you that aren't aware, Alice's solution is one of those things that a lot of folks in the industry have been looking at. We believe in the power. And our hope is, and that's why the venture capitalists are so important, that they can stay solvent long enough until the market catches up. So yeah, please take it away.
Nice. And it's funny because the topic of this panel is AI. And of course, we like to say AI to other investors who are listening to us in the press because it's the buzzword, right? But we are not so much, we don't consider ourselves AI. Like the real value, what we provide to the industry is really coming up with alternative scenarios and schedules. So right now, if you think about traditionally how you're planning, you only have so much capacity, so much bandwidth, and you're usually coming up, you're using your intuition, you're using your experience, you come up with one scenario, one schedule. And our value, our proposition is that you're going to be able to use AI to come up with multiple scenarios and really come up with the most efficient way to build your project. So it's AI, but we like to think of ourselves as intelligence, so IEA, intelligence augmentation, and not have people so stuck on the AI, which comes with a lot of baggage oftentimes.
Well, that's fair, and that's a good point too. I mean, a lot of the things, we were just listening to the safety conversation, and it wasn't about replacing people, it was about augmenting people with safety gear. You listen to the robotics one, same thing. It's not about replacing people. In some instances it may be, but it's about helping people. So that's a very good clarification. Anthony, how does kind of the cloud platform approach, what you're doing at Hypar, kind of really focus on helping our industry? And focus on the non-technical users for this answer. Like, what is that value proposition?
Sure. I mean, when it's not so much that you go cloud first because cloud is cool. It's more like what are the requirements of what you're trying to deliver? And essentially, we have problems out there that are arbitrarily large computational problems that may be tractable. There are others that require human judgment. For those that are, arbitrarily large, you need kind of an arbitrarily large substrate to actually compute them, right? And so that's why you go to the cloud. And the other reason for us to go to the cloud is we had an early kind of my partner Ian Q and I had an early heart-to-heart, like, do we open source the entire platform and let people do whatever they want with it? And the reason we didn't do that and why we're on the cloud is that this industry is very, very bad at sharing expertise with other folks, other peers, exactly in the way that the software industry is much better than them. So what we wanted to do was encourage a place where expertise could be shared for compensation if people want. And to do that, you actually have to be on the cloud because you need this forum that is worldwide for people to be able to share expertise with one another in exactly the same way that we put projects together when we have international firms that come together to form that temporary corporation that we call a project team, right? And so what we were trying to do is provide a technical substrate that would allow the same behavior to happen with technology.
Thank you for that. I guess we got to bring in Patrick here because this is something that I think is very unique. You heard Jeff earlier in the morning talk about how Elliston's going from a construction company to a software company and some of the things that maybe Elliston's done. But here we have somebody from a US contractor who's done that same thing with the product in the market right now. So Patrick, how does Toggle impact construction? And what is kind of the big kind of picture of what it would be doing essentially to our industry once it gets to that level where we want to see it?
So the origin of Toggle is out of a construction company, as Ahmad mentioned, Coastal Construction. And in 2017, 2018, I was going through our financials of Coastal and realized that the single biggest piece of overhead in our company was pre-construction. And I had been sort of out of the family business, Coastal, for 12 years doing other things. And I got back and everything was exactly the same. Nothing had changed in over a decade. I'm like, what the fuck? This is crazy. We got to do something better here. So of course, okay, go to the financials. Where's the overhead? Okay, it's still pre-con. Start peeling back the onion there. And 50 to 60% of our pre-con's team was coloring, right? Was doing takeoffs, manual takeoffs, right? Determining the square footages and the counts and the linear. And it's really important, don't get me wrong, but we have 30 plus engineers and, pre-con experts that I believe should be focused on value engineering, on scoping, right, on bid leveling, and all the things that actually win a job for a GC and actually create value for that client, not doing the monotonous, boring work of a takeoff. So that's when sort of the light bulb went off for me. Holy cow, let's use AI. There's a data set and it's a problem that's repeated every single day. So we originally built the company for our own, pre-con team, thinking if we could save, X amount of money a year, that was an easy investment to make. As we started seeing the tech working, then we said, holy cow, this could be bigger than Coastal because every construction company in the world has to do a takeoff, right? If you're building barns in, I don't know, Nebraska, I don't know the places where barns would be here in Canada, but you have to know how much
north of Nebraska.
The simplest project, you have to do a takeoff, right? So anyway, we realized it was very scalable. And for us, we wanted to stay very focused. Obviously in the beginning, we said, oh, we got to do pricing and I want, turnkey, put a set of plans and tell me what it costs. Okay, it sounds good, but that's too much to chew at once, right? And pricing is, I believe, very gray based on a lot of factors we don't have to get into. Your square footage is pretty much black and white, right? We can all agree on the square footage of this room if we took it off. So that's where we want to be very focused.
9 out of 10 of us would agree on
yeah. The developer architect might fight us, but anyway, we want to be very focused on that. And so going forward, our proposition to contractors, to trades, even some big developers and groups that use our software is allowing the humans to focus on those higher value tasks. And I think for all the folks here, we're all going to have our sort of use case or tech that we lean toward or understand. And there's going to be a lot of these that piece by piece are hopefully going to drive more productivity and efficiency in our industry, ultimately to get better margins. At the end of the day, we operate typically on very skinny margins in the industry. These technologies have to catch up to improve that.
Yeah, maybe I'll pull a thread there from Patrick's statement because I really like the way you said it. Technology, inclusive of any use of AI, is a tool, right? It's one of many tools, right? And what's really challenging, I think, with AI is it's a bit of a black box tool to many of its users. Often, it's developers when you look at the macro scale of LLMs. And so what is challenging is, do I trust it? And Takeoffs is a great example. I was collaborating with a really great builder and their estimating group. And the estimating group made the observation that they still do spread footing takeoffs every single bid. You know, it's like a lot of time to do it. They say, well, we got to mitigate the risk. If I don't do the takeoff, I don't know the job. If I don't know the job, there's unpriced risk, right? So where do you use a tool that is predictable, that gives you a result that you can make a better commercial decision with, that you trust? And I think building that trust is a really interesting conversation on how we use technology, AI or otherwise, and is a big piece of how we look at investing. Can a founder and can a technology build trust? And like that's a hard part, but a big part.
And if I could answer your question and the audience's question, do you trust it? No.
Yeah.
Would you? Because the level the AIs are functioning at right now is a very fast and very stupid intern. So, you know, would you trust the intern to do your
Eighth grade
takeoff?
intern,
Yeah, without checking, right? And so, yes, you would probably spot check extensively through a project just to make sure that the methodology that the intern used was fine, and then maybe you start to trust. But the systems, as primitive as they are today with regard to what a human can do, an expert human can do, you know, are going to get better. And so there will be a point, they will build trust just as a human builds trust inside your organization. But this one, you know, doesn't get tired and never dies. So,
Well, and speaking, I was going to call out Ahmad did one of the very best comparisons on building trust with AI clearing on the discussion you did about seeing if it catches an intentional mistake, which I think is like way more sophisticated than most of us think to create that experiment.
Absolutely. I mean, part of that AI clearing one, we can talk about that later, was to see, does the AI technology work, to kind of all three of the gentlemen's points, is you've got superintendents on site who are building the job. They tell us, even with the BIM VDC stuff, for example, which isn't novel anymore, it's been there for decades, that we don't trust it until we can verify it. So when we brought on an AI tool that was supposed to tell us progress, complete, all that kind of detailed, and if things are out X, Y, Z, X millimeters, do you think a superintendent's going to have that gut feel of trusting them, just like that intern Anthony was talking about? No. So we had a few curveballs in there that our team didn't correct, let's just say, and didn't update the startup on to validate that. So that's a good point that you're bringing up, is a lot of times within architecture, engineering, construction, and the entire stakeholders there, you know, you got to be creative to validate the technology, so it's not the end users who are going to be using it saying, hey, this is effed up, it's not going to work. But you're building that in as the innovation team, as the VDC team, BIM team, to get that cultural change. Really quickly, because Patrick talked about the overhead piece of estimators, I just want to put that out there. Every construction company right now, their probably number one cost of overhead is going to be your estimating team. Because if you can't count those lines, you can't highlight them and color them up, you're not going to be able to win the work. So you need to put that money in. So the power of technology in that realm. And then the last thing, just because you brought up coloring, this may sound stupid, but bear with me. When I started with Elliston, our superintendent, same stories you guys probably hear, 30 years of experience, yada, 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 could build a skyscraper sleeping, told me, you know what, if you want to be successful, well, actually, hold on. First thing when I walked on site, what he said was, get the fuck out of here. Come back when your model can dig a hole in the ground. That's when I'm going to fucking use this pitch. So that's how I started. But we built a relationship after that. And once we became friends, what he imparted his wisdom on me was
And his language.
his language, pardon my French. We are in Canada, so it's bilingual, by the way. But he's like, you know, all you got to learn how to do is play in the sandbox like when you were a kid. All right. Pretend you're the teacher watching 4 kids and none of them are your kids. And you got to make them build that castle. That's what your job's going to be for the rest of your life if you stay in construction. And really, if you look around the room, that's kind of what it's become. And even the coloring kind of on the estimating side is built into the nature. So that's enough about that. Real quickly, Aaron, we've got perspectives from the startups on kind of what they think the industry is kind of up to, what their products are doing. From the venture capital side, the reason why I want to highlight this is because if you look at Patrick's team, they came from construction, not necessarily funded by venture capital. And then, of course, Anthony and Alex can talk a little bit, or Alex from Alex can talk a little bit further about that. But there's the bootstrapping method of creating a business and a startup. Then there's the venture funded method where you're trying to grow your company to get that product market fit. So Aaron, how is it that you guys are looking to make investments? How do you choose some of the companies that stick out? And just for fun, okay, I'm sorry to do this to you. If you could only make an investment in one of these three gentlemen, who would it be?
So one quick observation: you've called me a venture capitalist 3 times, which is like probably offensive in most contexts. But I think, you know, with that joke, the number one thing we tend to look at the lens through is who's the client and is there ROI? That's it, right? Like that's what drives adoption almost always. The other piece too is I listened to the robotics panel, and there's a phrase in a lot of construction, which is boring is good, right? Technology is awesome at creating consistent results for boring tasks. So we like to focus on ROI, boring, consistent, right? Like that's a, you know, it doesn't sound sexy because it's not, but like I don't get paid to find sexy, cool, crazy things. Find things that are pragmatic and deliver business results, because the vast majority of every publicly traded company does pretty boring things. And if that's the outcome, you want to stick with the plan. I'm not here to reinvent it. Mm-hmm. If I had to invest in one, well, so what I would do is I would call my other friends at other funds and make sure all 3 are well funded. Look, I really respect all 3 a lot. The one that I think is, you know, look, you guys are all great, but Patrick, I've spent a lot of time with you, so you'll win the race because you might be back in office. So.
Nice. Well, there you go. Thank you for playing along. I put him on the spot, as you guys can tell, but it's all good. We've got a good bunch here. So, you know, the next question I really want Anthony to kind of dig into here. How is kind of our industry, AEC overall right now, in using technology? And you don't go deep into it, just at a high level. And then how are we looking at, specifically with your kind of tool, to change and bring benefit, for example, for architects or our developers, kind of our clients on the early side of things?
I guess, you know, for us, what we usually talk to customers about is time to decision, right? Because what we see is there's a cycle, there's a decision cycle at any stage in the project where one of the big impediments is getting everybody in the same room so everybody can just sign off on something, even if it's a virtual room, right? And so what you want to do is try to minimize the number of those events that you have, because it's just so hard to schedule everybody, because every single one of those people is worrying about 5 other projects, right? So where we come in is talking about, like, how can I explore options quickly in a room with a bunch of people who can all sign off on it, and we can move on to the next stage of the project. And so I think we don't see a whole lot of adoption. There's still a cycle that everybody's kind of used to, like, we have a meeting, there's some feedback, there's 2 weeks. And we do that 5 times, and then we come to a decision, right? There's a lot of very pragmatic adoption, I think, in the fields that we're seeing, especially, you know, a lot of the robotic stuff, around the factors of reaching decisions faster. A lot of what we have to say is, you know, all that automation you do in your factory, you do in the field and all this stuff, you can bring that back into your office processes as well. Do the boring stuff with automated processes to concentrate on the sexy stuff, which is, we all agree that this is where we need to go.
That's awesome. And then I guess, can we bring you and Alex as well to talk about the planning and scheduling side? Because, I mean, as Anthony elaborated, some of the decisions that are happening for clients, architects, and the time to get that decision done. As I kind of alluded to earlier, for every single construction company or client, it's literally the schedule which is driving everything. That's our plan, right? So how do we look at it from your lens, and how can you kind of impart some wisdom on where Alice is trying to push everyone now?
Yeah, absolutely. So what's interesting is we didn't try to just automate the schedule creation process. That's something that we do, but really what we're doing is we're trying to increase transparency between different parties. When you can create many different schedules, when you can simulate everything, you're bringing all the different parties to the room, and it's a lot less about opinions now, right? Like, I mean, you don't have, hey, I've been doing this for 20 years, this is my idea, and then, the owners have to trust it. You can actually sit down and say, look, like we've ran some numbers. You've shared your goals with us. We've shared our constraints, and this is what the software came up with, and it's viable, and it's feasible, and it's efficient. Do you agree with this, or do you want us to look into other alternatives? Mm-hmm. So it's just really about, we've heard from customers saying like, hey, look, using Alice, we've had a brand new relationship. Like the owner is asking questions that they've never had the opportunity to ask before, and we're able to answer them, and that really builds a new level of relationship between the different parties. So people that used to be siloed, working separately, are now just coming together, and schedulers are becoming more strategists, which is exactly what we want. Mm-hmm. And they like that. I mean, no one's come to us and said, look, I miss building 10,000 activities line by line in P6.
Yeah.
That's not the fun part. The fun part is to really, find a new solution, a more efficient solution, come back to the table and be, look, we've been doing this for 20 years, but actually there is a new sequence that I didn't think of that is 5% better.
Mm-hmm. And that's really hard to do, I guess, as well as, I mean, some of the folks here may or may not have experience with simulations of construction schedules, but a lot of the VDC, BIM kind of teams, that's kind of what they're trying to do, is just take that Gantt chart, throw it to 3D model, add times and different sequences and options, and try and provide that. And quite frankly, I mean, I don't know how many people are aware of the energy and resources that takes, but it's not something you can do on every single job across your portfolio. So what Alex is kind of saying is like, hey, we have this potentially tool available for you to do that on almost every job, and it takes away that brain drain that you would need to have probably like 1,000 schedulers to pull off, and let those schedulers focus on what matters, which is the same thing that Anthony was saying and Patrick was saying. So now we're going to switch gears just a little bit. Patrick, I mean, you have the construction kind of company background. Aaron, you do as well. What is the relationship of AI, obviously because it's the hottest kind of topic of the day, with risk? And the reason why, Anthony and Alex, we're not going to kind of push them for this, is we want to talk about this from a contractor standpoint of, we're here sitting, many of you see all these startups coming in, but if we don't even know how to manage the risk in a traditional construction process with different types of contracts, and we can barely even talk about SaaS, software as a service, and figure that out, how are we going to be looking at risk from an AI standpoint, putting in our contracts or our scopes or to our subcontractors, designers, to our clients, the IP around that, all that kind of stuff? So it's a loaded question, but Patrick, if you don't mind kicking it off.
Sure. One thing I want to highlight is coming up. We were talking earlier about how do you really trust the tool? Do you trust the AI? Do you trust wherever the software is? At lunch, I was talking with Sherry actually about the sort of false expectations that people often have of technology. And I'm sure Alex, faces this, and maybe you do as well. It's completely contrary to that, where they come to Toggle and they're like, oh, well, you're going to give me a takeoff, you're going to give me a price, and then you're going to wash my car at the end of the day. And if not, I don't want it. I'm like, what? I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm saving you like 12 hours a day. This is great. What else do you want? So it's like on one hand, sometimes you do hear they don't trust you, and then then they want more though, right? So there's this interesting conflict we see in the industry. And as that relates to risk, it's interesting, just another sort of story that's related. We launched a new vertical called Toggle GPT. It's self-explanatory. It's Toggle combined with GPT. And we didn't know exactly how folks were going to use it, but what we have now on job sites is people are uploading every single document they have, their plans, their spec books, their schedules, their contracts, their subcontracts, everything under the sun, RFIs, right? Tens of thousands of pages they're uploading to our portal, and then they're just communicating with it, right? Natural language. And what we've found is they're getting, number one, there's no hallucinations because it's only the information that's uploaded. Not like we're not searching, these large language models. It's just what's uploaded. And so folks are getting answers to questions on the spot for, hey, what's the liquidated damages if we're, 42 days late on this project? Who's responsible for the caulking on the windows here? Who's installing the lights? And, what are the appliance package on the 11th floor? Whatever the question is, and they're getting these answers. And what we've found is, it relates to risk, is a lot of the time the folks are so busy, they're really not going to go figure the answer out to that because they don't want to go back to the trailer. They don't want to go get the PDF and figure out the contract and read through, 80 pages and figure it out. And then someone else just ends up doing the work, or it's some chargeback or some change order, and it ends up really not being accounted for correctly, and if they do go look for it, it's a 2-day time suck. And so while you could say, do you really trust the AI? Do you really trust all the answers? I would rather our team at Coastal, if I wear our hat, at least try to get the answer and get to the bottom of these problems and get that information than like winging it or not doing it or just passing it on to the attorneys, which is even higher, cost per hour, and at least trying to get that answer. So not that that's an end all be all, but I think people are starting to get more and more trust in all these various solutions that are out there. But like everything, trust but verify for now.
Yeah, I mean, if I could pick up on that point, I think one of the things that we find is that AI is actually a democratizing force against these highly technical procedures, pieces of software, et cetera. So, a couple of, 2 projects we did, one, drop a photo into a model, will create a facade for you, right? That's something anybody can do, right? They don't have to know about facades. That stuff is embedded in the software already, so we can rationalize some arbitrary thing into something that can be built, right? And then the other is, some people may have seen the text to BIM thing, right? And under there, there's actually some very rigorous procedures to make a building, but the interface to it is very open, right? So anybody can type a sentence in and get something out. It depends on what language you use, what the quality on the other side. But I think that, like you're saying, rather than somebody having, a law degree and flipping through the contract, right? They can actually just ask a rational question to a document repository and get a reasonable answer back that could be actionable. And I think that is a really great injection of what AI can do for the industry, in that, lowering the barrier of access to actionable information.
Good point. And then Aaron, anything to add into that?
I mean, I'd feel remiss to not say RTFC. Everyone that knows. No one here knows.
No one knows. Can you please add context?
Read the effing contract. So, construction is an ecosystem. That's our third F-bomb. It's an ecosystem, and what it is it's always there's a lot of passing the risk, right? Mm-hmm. Within your company, right? General contractors are a collection of projects, right? And there's even passing within a company, outside of a company, et cetera, to your subs, to the supplier, up and down the stream. The ability to understand what's my action and what's not my action, exactly to your point, is super valuable. I'm excited for that to be more transparent. It's not very transparent today. We both are victims of that, and we abuse it. And so I completely agree with the get to action quicker. But yeah, RTFC.
There you go. All right, so we only have a few minutes left. We've got 50 questions we've got to get through. So if you guys don't mind just sitting down until we get through them all. That was a bad joke. There you go. We need a little bit more energy here. Come on, guys. So we're going to switch gears a little bit because Patrick has a little bit of history in Congress, and because the other 3 gentlemen are dealing with startups day in, day out, building a business, investing, trying to sell clients and get that kind of market change. What are the ethical considerations when it comes to AI, specifically within construction? So I'm not going to pick any of you. Whoever's got something going, go.
I'm last.
All right, I'll go first. One that is really hard, and this is not just AI, is data ownership.
Yep.
Right? A general contractor will claim ownership, an owner can claim ownership, a trade can claim ownership. Who owns the data is not a black and white answer. It's everyone and it's no one. So I think one ethical question is, does the counterparty to a technologist have the rights to upload that data? And I think understanding that data ownership up front is helpful. I don't know if there's an answer sitting here today, but it is, I think, an important part of a puzzle. and could get murky if we fast forward the clock 10 years.
I think part of the problem is actually the scalability of AI to arbitrary applications. Because if you think about it, like there have been court cases long ago that you own everything in your head. Who owns your human experience? You do, right? So if you leave a company and you have experience in your head, you're allowed to use that, right? And so if you start thinking about AIs in this regard, well, it's having an experience of some kind and it's learning, and you own the AI. So do you own all that experience that it has? I think that's, if you start looking at it from a human point of view and how do we handle that, then the question is, well, the problem is I know the human can't work on 6,000 jobs at the same time, so the damage of that IP walking around is limited, but now it's unlimited.
But what's really interesting is everyone followed the New York Times lawsuit, right? This is, to your exact point, is in the AI's head, it's authored photos, works of art, et cetera, using copyrighted but publicly available material previously. Where's that line?
Right.
And no idea.
I think we're getting a preview in what's happening in Hollywood with the strikes there, right, with the writers and the actors. And I think we've all seen the argument that they have, which is very, kind of what you were just saying, right? I think we're going to see that in construction, since we're always slow and behind. It'll be like 20 years, but I think we're going to see it, because I think we're all going to be alive in a world where there's three basic inputs for future of construction. What's the address? What's the budget? And what's the style? And the generative AI will know exactly the address, what the density is, and what can be built there. It'll know, based on the style you chose, what you want to build, a 10-story Mediterranean apartment, whatever it is. It'll know the most efficient layout for that. It'll know the building code, right? And it can generate the MEPs, the structural plans, et cetera, because there's been millions of buildings built, and it's going to do it automatically. Now, is it one architect's plan, like a little bit more favored in that? Do they have rights to it, like the writers are arguing in Hollywood now? Right? Is that the world? I'm way above my pay grade, but there's going to be, I think, this industry after industry, these fights are going to play out for a long time.
No, that's good. And I mean, real quick, 'cause before we turn over to the audience for questions, so please, guys, think right now about questions, because it's not every day we get 3 startup CEOs and a venture capitalist up here. So think about it. Let's take this opportunity. But what is the role of government? Now, this is a weird question, especially since COVID. Everybody's a little bit iffy talking about government, but let's get to that, quite frankly, especially because, again, we have somebody that's a former congressman, somebody that's looking to build up companies and invest in them, and then 2 folks that are really trying to create a business. And again, capital flows to where policies are, and I think nobody's going to argue that part. So what is the role of government, really quickly? Maybe, Alex, you started off.
Well, I have one perspective on this, and it's simply, if you have a publicly funded project, a big railway project, a roadway project, if there is a more efficient way to build it, less time, less cost, wouldn't you have some sort of obligation to the taxpayer to find that solution and use it, right? So I'll just leave it at that question. And I think we have the answer. We can do it, but we don't necessarily have the incentives in place, the contractual incentives in place to make that a reality. But that's something that we face pretty often.
That's a good point. So the levers aren't there. Aaron?
Look, I'm American, so I can give the easy American answer, which is like as little as possible.
I thought you were going to say I plead the 4th or whatever, 5th.
It's the 5th, don't worry. But actually, I'm going to answer it with this, which is, as we use technology more, particularly when we look at AI-driven solutions, they find averages very well, and they are not considerate of equality or inherent bias in what may have impacted AI. This doesn't apply as much to construction as it does a lot of other areas, and I think we have a lot of thought-provoking conversation to understand how does government ensure that bias is mitigated appropriately in tools.
Awesome. Patrick?
So a quick story. When I was in Congress, I was on the Intelligence Committee, and this was 2012, 2013. Twitter was newer, and all these social media apps, and there was an older gentleman, member of Congress, that was on the Intel Committee. His staff didn't want him tweeting, so they opened up an Excel spreadsheet, a Google Doc, basically, named it Twitter, and he was typing to his staff on there, and he didn't know the difference. right? And his staff was typing back, that was Twitter, and he was, oh, I'm on Twitter, I had no idea, and his team was keeping him from it. My point is,
That is genuinely hilarious.
I was expecting a bigger reaction. So what is going to happen, of course, is technology is going to continue being light years ahead of what the policymakers can comprehend, understand, interpret. And look, at the end of the day, they're dealing with hundreds of issues a day. They're not experts on any, on all of these issues. No one can be. But what happens often when they do that is they sort of retract and they get scared and they put in policies that they don't understand the ramifications of it. And just with my, I guess, U.S. hat on, I'm worried that the U.S. goes too far in this. And so to your point, with do nothing, we could go too far. And other countries that aren't going to have those restrictions could start to run circles around this and start to aggregate so much data that it becomes very hard for us to keep up with. And whether that's in a nefarious way with cyber or whether that's in a really good way of creating certain things that we can't even imagine today, we have to find that balance. I know it's a really vague, tough answer, but it's a really tough problem for government to solve.
That's fair.
I mean, I would say, for those of us who live in at least ostensible democracies, government, I will illustrate, is us, right? So this is really how we want to live together. And if your government cannot keep you safe, you live in a failed state. So the question is, do these technologies represent societal dangers? In what context do they represent that danger? And how little regulation can we get away with to allow innovation that still keeps the citizens safe from the technology, from bad actors who use the technology, from foreign competition who may be working under fewer restrictions, ethical restrictions. And I think, that's fundamentally the role of government, to evaluate on our behalf how these technologies can be profitably integrated in society and avoid as much of the dangers as we can. And that will lead to some sort of regulation, just as we all are in regulation. We stop at red lights, we do stuff that makes us able to live together. And there's going to be a point where these AIs are going to, in all but rights, start to function as citizens. And so we have to look at that coming, and how do we protect ourselves from these odd citizens? And how do we steer them into profitably contributing to a better life for society?
After the break, we'll cover the Second Amendment.
Yeah, there you go.
There we go.
So really quickly, any questions while you guys have this talent up on the stage? All right, man in the blue shirt.
My experience with large language models, ChatGPT and Bing and stuff, the problem of being, I'm not gonna say lying, but confidently wrong is a lot. And when referring to, hey, read the contract, what if the AI tool that is happened, what tools, what steps exist, going to be developed to mitigate being confidently wrong 100 times or 1 in 10, 1 in 10 times?
I mean, personally, I would like to see more of confidence level delivered with the answer. I'm not sure exactly how you would write that algorithm, but I am 80% confident that this guy is responsible for the caulking, something like that.
Yeah, p-value right there.
Yeah, p-value.
If I could provide another, I think there's a lot of mixing up of technologies right now. I mean, obviously we talk about AI, and this year it's all been about generative AI. It's all been about, which is, it's a subset, it's machine learning, it's large language models, but AI has been around for a real long time. And, I think the type of AI that you do, generative design, I mean, it's parametric. What we do is it's parametric, so you trust the answer the same way that you trust your calculator when you enter some numbers and it gives you a number. And I think that's, we need to do a better job as service providers to really kind of explain that so that the whole population doesn't think that, hey, you're just asking the AI and it's hallucinating an answer. We know the stakes are really high, and that's not the use case that we have.
That was a great question, great answers. Going once, oh, right there.
My question is to Alex. So with the implementation of Alice, for example, what are some of the key performance indicators you guys measure for return on investment?
For return on investment? So we really look at, this is a conversation we have at the beginning of any project. Actually, before we even decide to work with the customer, we'll sit down with them and we really ask them, what are the things that you would like to measure? What is a measure of success for you? And if we don't have a common agreement as to, first of all, do you have measures that are you going to be willing to look at these numbers throughout the deliverable of this project? And if that's not an obvious answer, oftentimes we just don't start that project with our customer because we know we're not going to be necessarily set up for success. And at this point in our growth, we want to be working on, with customers that are really excited, that are going to be measuring it from the beginning to the end, and who are going to have an obvious ROI, really.
So it's very case by case.
Every project is unique. Sometimes it's about, completing quicker. Sometimes it's about managing a certain type of risk. Sometimes it's about, you're building a station in Antarctica and you have to beat the winter schedule. And so you're trying to complete a bunch of sequences. Sometimes you have very specific procurement issues. So it's very, very different. I would love to see some pattern. It would make my life easier. But every new project is just a completely new challenge.
Spoken like a true AI person, eh? Yeah, any other questions real quick? Going once.
over there.
Oh, right there.
And there.
Oh, okay. You first and then you next.
Oh, there's somebody back here too.
So you got to cut a check out to Aaron before you can talk to the gentleman. No, I'm joking.
Did you put our Venmos up? Or?
Yeah. No, but you guys want to answer that? They're curious on investment opportunities and.
I mean, it kind of depends on what round somebody's on, whether they're open to strategic investors. There's there's an equation, and then there's judgment that goes into it, and it's all much like every project is unique. All investments are unique into unique companies.
And I'm happy to share some thoughts on if you're looking for angel investing, stage appropriateness, liquidity considerations. There is no liquidity. And some other considerations. So you're welcome to find me and I'm happy to share pre-seed angel investing advice.
Thank you very much. And then there's a hand over there.
Actually, it's more like a general kind of question about the use of AI in construction. I don't know, I think everybody here has worked in construction before, and we have this tendency of having a lot of disputes at the end of the construction once you have to do the job. And when you start using AI, if your model, the way how you put your algorithm is biased, you might take your client to taking the wrong decision based on something that was not well trained or well tested. So are you guys foreseeing those types of problems later on once your client goes to court and say, hey, I make this decision based on what the algorithm told me? What do you guys do next?
Who wants to take that? Yeah.
Sure, I can jump in on one tool we're working on that is tracking, so I'll break it up in two parts. The first piece is, I think there's a lot of disputes over change orders and who's responsible for that, of course. So one of the tools we're releasing soon basically quantifies every change order automatically for the user. So if you have your original version, every change thereafter can be overlaid automatically, and then thanks to GPT, put in human terms exactly what changed. This wall moved 6 inches. There's a tub where there used to be a shower, et cetera, every single change. So it almost creates a block change from that first set of plans you received as a GC all the way through to the end of CO, right? And you'll have a whole list to go show the owner, architect. And so to me, as a GC, if I wear that hat, that's really powerful, right? All of a sudden, you'll say, hey, you don't think there were change orders? What do you think about this? So that's just factual. That is what it is. That helps track. I think that really empowers the contractors and trade partners. On the flip side of that, though, when you start generating and coming up with ideas and solutions, whether it's a schedule, whether it's a design, we're working on some NEP generative design capabilities, and it's wrong. Yeah, that's dangerous, uncharted territory, and I think like a lot of software companies, people are going to be signing their life away in that little fine print in the terms.
Yeah, there's still a human in the loop somewhere, right?
Yeah.
Someone said,
At the end of the day,
someone
you gotta check
purveyed,
this,
someone purveyed that solution. So.
The county or local government's still going to have to look at.
Is there
it. So
anyone
an
from
engineer?
anyone from Autodesk here? I'm sure that's never.
We got a few back there.
Yeah.
Put your hands up. There you go.
It's probably an interesting discussion there, yeah.
Well, we're out of time. It's break time. If you guys don't mind, let's give them a very warm Canadian round of applause.